Hello, hello.
Hey,
How's it going?
pretty good.
Good. All right. Well, it's interesting to start a bit later. We had, gosh, I think we measured it. It was like 16 inches out there.
Evening. Yeah, that's the big thing that was making it kind of hard for us to do. We did my grandparents, and they had a big issue. They had a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
going on. They
I,
had a lot of stuff there. This weather is
I,
making us a little late, guys. That's why we had to start so late.
yeah. But I mean, I think it's all the way from Texas up to Michigan. I mean, in Texas, their power's going out just because they don't have enough people, or they don't have enough power.
Yeah, I heard about that. It was horrible up there.
Yeah.
Really cold down in
But
Texas. Kind of odd. Hey, guys,
yeah.
thank you to the people who are already in here. Um, We're just starting up. We got started a little late today because of all the snow. Me and Spencer were both out taking care of driveways and stuff for people.
Yep.
So
I think we
cleaning
took
up and
care of like 7 driveways.
yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, just cleaning because it's pretty. There's a lot of snow around here.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's a lot of snow everywhere. Today we'll be covering censorship in America. It's a pretty diverse topic. Definitely something that's really gripped our nation, especially during this last year. So something very prevalent.
Yeah.
So I hope to be getting a lot of input from people today, but if you are unable to, that is absolutely okay. But please tune in and say your piece, say your 2 cents. We love to hear it.
Yeah. I think the fact that people are able to join in is what adds so much variety to this type of content rather than a just normal talk show.
Yes, absolutely. It's the live. We love the live. We love talking to everybody. It makes us happy.
Yeah.
You guys are our content. All right, well, we'll go ahead and start right on off. Like I already said, we're talking about censorship. First up today, we're going to talk about the most recent thing that's happened in this realm of censorship, and that's the Gina Serrano incident.
Oh yeah. And we have some good news on that actually. There is some good and hope in it.
Oh yeah,
But
well, I haven't heard that yet. So
yeah. I'll mention that a bit later in once we get into it.
okay, yeah. Well, Gina Serrano, for anybody who does not know who she is the actress who plays Cara Dune, aka the Marshal, in Disney Plus's new-ish show, The Mandalorian. Um, she's someone that we've all thought is absolutely awesome, such a stellar person, and just a really, really bright personality. And so we've really loved watching her. Um, Recently, last week, she posted onto Twitter, and second here, let me get the exact quote. Which also, if you guys, anybody who's looking for this online, you will not find it unless you do a lot of searching. So don't go thinking I'm making this stuff up. She posted onto Twitter. Jews were beaten in the streets, not by Nazi soldiers, but by their neighbors, even by children. Quote, because history is so edited, most people today don't realize that to get to the point where Nazi soldiers could easily round up thousands of Jews, the government first made their own neighbors hate them simply for being Jews. How is that any different from hating someone for their political views? This is a great analogy into our modern day situation, some of the stuff we're facing here in America. Um, we have censorship going on from companies and from especially a social media. You got these people who are just deciding, I don't want to hear what you have to say. And they use various different excuses or reasons to censor those people and remove what they're saying from their websites. Gina Serrano is a very sad instance of this because she's such an amazing person. She's really a stellar personality. She's
Right.
been praised for her strong attitude and for her personality all over throughout her role as fulfilling in Mandalorian.
Well, and on top of that, I mean, I think she's a great actor, and you could see that in The Mandalorian. But on top of that, the fact that she's just a very well put together, well rounded woman. She has very good martial arts training. A lot of people don't have that, but the fact that she's gone through that kind of shows some of her toughness, especially in terms of her dedication to training and other things.
Absolutely. We got our first message of the day. We'll go ahead and play that real quick.
People that censor people and block people and mute people and all of that type of stuff, the people that do this to other people, to just show how childish they are. This culture that's going on
Absolutely.
right now is just it's so biased, it's so discriminatory, all of that. Like people saying racism is bad. Really, how people are counseling people and forming opinions and riding with their own biasness is really, that's worse than anything right now. It's crazy. You can't say anything out of the way without offending somebody some way, somehow. It's crazy.
Yes, this is
That's
so
yeah,
true.
great point. First of all, thanks for keeping that clean. For people that are listening, we appreciate when you leave clean comments. And you have a great point. The fact that people are saying I want to silence someone because I don't agree with them, not because it's a call to violence or anything. That really is just a childish behavior. It's saying I don't like what someone's saying because it contradicts with what I think. Therefore, we should get rid of it. It's childish, and it's not the way that adults should be acting, especially on the scale of social media where you have these giant companies and these very powerful people who are acting this way.
Yes, that is a great point. Whenever I think of especially unjustified, which is a lot of what's going on right now. It's unjustified censorship, and I mean censorship for reasons of keeping things clean, things that are against the law. Certain inappropriate content on websites. That is something that's not censorship. That is just keeping your website clean and following the law. Um, but when you have people who just are like, I don't really like what this person's saying, so we're just not going to have this here anymore. We're just going to get rid of it. We're going to pretend like it never existed, right? And they've started justifying it with something we've seen that is fact checkers, and we hate them.
Yep.
They don't make a lot of sense to. I don't think they're making a lot of sense to anybody. The lying is pretty habitual. But whenever I picture these people who censor someone, the picture that comes to my mind is like a little toddler who doesn't want to listen to what someone has to say, so he just starts screaming so loud that nobody else, that person, that
That's a
toddler can't hear
great
what the child is screaming, and nobody can hear what another person is saying just because the child is screaming so loud.
that's actually that's a great point, and that's similar to the way that cancel culture works. I mean, that's what affected Gina Carano is she got canceled. Disney canceled her. They fired her because she said something. Because a bunch of people looked at what she said and said, "I don't like this," and started that proverbial screaming. They started saying, "Fire her," or they said, "We don't want her as part of the Mandalorian. We don't want her as part of Disney."
Yeah, absolutely. That is the best point. Gina Serrano, for just a little more background, so everybody understands who she really is. We've already covered her character and how amazing she is, but she is a Trump supporter, and she personally also holds in with the view of the election fraud was true. And she's posted about a lot of this stuff to Twitter. It's pretty obvious that since Twitter has been censoring any of this speech already, she was probably already in their sights as someone that they were just looking to say something.
Well, actually,
And
there was news that Disney for about 2 months has been looking for a reason to fire her, and they couldn't quite get quote unquote severe enough thing to fire her. And then finally they said, well, this is our chance. This is what we're going to use to fire her.
Yeah, exactly. They really did. They capitalized on that. And the reason that they're capitalized on this is because there was a public outcry. Actually, I guess that's not really true because public outcry is more of a unanimous thing. There was an outcry more so from the left, saying that it was horrible how Gina Serrano basically just dishonored or offended the Jews in the Holocaust. But something I'm saying to keep in mind is that number one thing is that she never committed anything wrong. She was simply using her knowledge of the history to bring defense to compare it to the present. And that's exactly why we study
Right.
history. We study it so we can. I can't remember the exact phrase at the moment, but you study history so you're not doomed to repeat it.
Well, and on top of that, there's just blatant hypocrisy when this comes, because Pedro Pascal, who plays the Mandalorian, right? Same show, somewhat same level of actor, I would say, in terms of popularity. He, just a few months ago, he's a very outspoken leftist. He's made a comparison to the Holocaust, and yet nothing was said, nothing was done. And it just goes to show you that there really is a hypocrisy when it comes to they don't mind making a comparison to the Holocaust as long as it favors what they're saying.
Yep. Real quick to go back to Gina Serrano, I want to really focus on what she said in her thing, because not only is it a great example of the intolerance that you get from the left, who continually pushes censorship, but it's also a great example of why history is being changed. In Nazi Germany, before a lot of the deaths of the Holocaust, the Nazis continually pushed out propaganda and portrayed Jews as horrible people who would betray or backstab their neighbors. So in turn, their neighbors became fearful of them. They turned them in. Sometimes they would hurt them themselves. And this is just a horrible, horrible thing. But she made the perfect comparison, because this is happening in our modern day, and we are having people on the left who hate people on the right, and people on the right who are equally against the left for their hate. As much as we try to stay impartial and we try not to, we are all just people. And when one person hates us to the point that they would wish to do us harm, it becomes very difficult not to feel the same way back to them, or at least not feel like we need to defend ourselves. And these are the things in which make situations escalate. It needs to stop with the buck, and the buck needs to be the first person. They need to realize, the people on the left and people who are committing censorship and going against people, they need to realize, wait a second, we're not actually helping anything. We're actually creating a very potentially horribly violent situation here, where people are going to be turned against neighbor. And that's just, it is a sad thing, but it was a very true comparison. So right off the bat, before we continue with our topic today, I just want to make sure that everybody's clear that what she said was an absolute fact, and something that is the definition of the reason why we study history in this all over the world. It's why we study history. It's why we know it, so we don't repeat it.
She wasn't even comparing America right now to. She didn't say Jews in concentration camps or whatever, right? If I would say that would have been a not correct comparison, right? I mean, right now Republicans are not in concentration camps. However, she didn't even compare really the main atrocities of killing people in the Holocaust, but she said, look, the trajectory that led to the Holocaust is very similar trajectory that America is on right now, where if you ostracize half of the public and you say, right, because Jews were they weren't a 1% of the population in Germany. They were a decent chunk of it, and right now it's a very apt comparison, because it's saying, look, if you ostracize an entire group of people and make the public, or a slight majority of the public, hate them, then all you have to do is tell the public, let's put them in jail, and the public will say, okay, that's fine with us.
It's kind of a whole lemming situation with mob rule.
Yeah, which is what we were talking about yesterday.
Which ties right back into censorship, because you have people who, okay, so you have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Google, even Apple, who are committing acts of censorship, which, and we'll cover this in just a second, but some of these acts are actually illegal, but they still do them. And these acts of censorship just create a lemming following from the left side who agrees with the censorship and who dislikes the people who are being censored in the first place. And they're just like, oh yeah, you guys, we don't want to hear what they have to say either. We know that we're right, or whatever they believe, and they're just following them along like lemmings. So that creates more of that mob rule thing that Rick just talking about, that Spencer just mentioned right there. You get group censorship where entire swaths of people will just say, oh, what they said is evil. It doesn't matter what. I'm not even going to look at it myself because this one person said so, and so it has to be true, because it has to be false, or it has to be true because everything you read on the internet is trustworthy, right?
Oh yeah, I believe.
Oh yeah, totally true.
Even the stuff that contradicts and all the conspiracy theories. Oh yeah.
Yep, and censorship. Oh, go ahead, Spencer.
Oh no, go ahead, and then I have some. I'll get to the good news about her.
Okay, yeah. Actually, go ahead and do that because my thing ties in with all of that.
Okay, so this is much less well known than the fact that she got fired from The Mandalorian, but Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire have actually Ben Shapiro called Gina Carano, and they set it up that she's going to be directing a movie for the Daily Wire. I don't know how many people know this, but the Daily Wire has already produced one movie called Run, Hide, Fight. I haven't seen it, but it looks really good. And the Daily Wire is now teaming up with Gina Carano to have her direct and act in their next movie that they are going to release. So they are definitely fighting against this and helping her so that she's not completely ostracized by society.
That's awesome. Yeah, I haven't heard any news about that, and I didn't even know that they made a movie, so I will definitely have to go and watch those.
Yeah.
To continue with what I had just mentioned, I had previously mentioned that what the censorship is illegal, and here's where it comes down to. Most of the censorship, as we are aware, happens on social media platforms. Social media platforms have a whole slew of laws and content behind them. One law that protects them specifically from being prosecuted or getting in trouble at all from people who speak on their websites is Section 230. It's inside of part of the Communications Decency Act. That was in 1996. And this law, Section 230, essentially makes it so that way internet service providers, which boil down to social media platforms mainly, are immune from prosecution or anything such as that for people, whatever people say on their websites. So part of that, though, is that they cannot censor people on their websites. They have to allow free speech to take course. So it's essentially like being able to talk as you would in a normal conversation in real life, just using words instead of talking online. That's the same kind of thing, and so it gives that that right to the people. The issue is that, obviously, like I mentioned, they have to allow everybody to speak their mind, with the exception of things that violate other acts, such as graphic content, stuff that is illegal. And everyone, I would assume that everyone knows what I'm talking about. I don't have to go into detail about what this content might be. But these people, while they censor these things, and that is okay because they keep that out of the view of everyone. They also censor, like we've seen right here with Gina Carano. Twitter promptly deleted her tweet, and Disney obviously fired her. You have this happen all over the place with thousands of different accounts who have been blocked or posts removed with claims of false information, even though it may or may not have been false, or maybe it was simply just an opinion. And this has happened especially throughout 2020 in the last very heated election. And that is illegal because they have to allow open speech on their platforms. If they do not allow open speech, then they are not immune, whatever, immunity, whatever, unimmune.
There's a good way to look at that. The Section 230 basically makes a distinction between a publisher and a platform, and the way those two words are used and defined, a publisher would be like the Daily Wire or New York Times, where it is set up to publish, as the word says, an article or something, and the identifying underneath that. So if the New York Times says I'm a publisher, then the New York Times is responsible for any articles that are published on their site. So if someone publishes something that's inappropriate or is a call to action or violence, then they are responsible for that. But right now, these social media platforms identify as platforms rather than publishers. And platforms under 230 are defined as being places where it's kind of like a town square where you own the town square and you let people talk in the town square. And if someone says, kill the Jews in the town square, just because you own that ground doesn't mean you're responsible for what they say. And you can't get prosecuted because they said that. But right now, they're taking that a step further, way farther than they should be. And they're saying, okay, I own the town square, and I agreed that I wouldn't be prosecuted for what people say, but I don't like what this person says, so I'm going to kick them out anyways, even though that's not what I agreed to.
Yep, that's the perfect example. It's public speech, and they are censoring public speech, which essentially removes people's First Amendment right to the freedom of speech. And this obviously has pretty serious ramifications that are being overlooked, that people are not considering. But this censorship contains this takes place in all over the place. It takes place in more than just social media too, because like Spencer mentioned, this also happens on platforms, not platforms. This also happens on publishers, and while it is not legal for them to do it, they do it anyway. The news in America, while there is a certain degree of opinion, especially there is this straight up opinion shows, the news is relied upon for information and to speak the truth and the facts. And as we are aware, that is something that is not true with most of our present news, especially mainstream. There's a lot of ignorance, one thing, whether they claim ignorance or not, or there is censorship of one topic or another. For instance, CNN with the 2020 election fraud. They commonly did not talk about it at all, or they ignored it, or they straight up denied it. It was one of those three things. But then you had other places like Blaze TV, the Daily Wire, and they talked a lot about the election fraud and brought it to the front. And they brought out the evidence. They backed up their cases. They created the perfect argument and said, this is how it's happening. And it was revealed that the election fraud was true. Before going into too much detail on that, because that's a whole different conversation there. That can really, there's a lot of depth in that one. That's just an example of some of the censorship that happens furthermore in the news. So it's vast and unrestricted, but there are more common places that it happens, especially in social media and news. But it happens with cancel culture of people who just, for one reason or another, they just decide that this person doesn't deserve to be noticed anymore, or things like blacklisting over matters of opinion. So there's a lot to go on there that it really is up to each individual person to decide whether or not they can look at this stuff with a good conscience and say, yeah, this is okay. This is fulfilling First Amendment rights. Or if they're going to look at this and they're going to be like, wait a second, actually, this doesn't make any sense to me at all, because I know that this is what the law is. I know that this is what my right is. And then I see these other people who have the same rights, and their rights aren't being upheld and they aren't being honored.
Yeah.
Real quick, we do have another message here.
Yeah. Gina Carano got fired from The Mandalorian, and I'm really pissed. Going to make a movie with her.
It makes
certain what he said.
He basically said that Gina Serrano was fired and that he's mad, and I agree. We're all mad because she didn't really do anything that would be fire worthy. Honestly, we're in a very touchy culture at this point, where if I say something slightly wrong, that 20 years ago would have been, try not to say that, but you're fine. Now I could get fired and ostracized from everything just because I said something that maybe a few people didn't agree with.
And it doesn't even have to be in really insane things, such as hate speech and stuff like that. You don't even have to do that. In today's current cancel culture and censorship of so many people, you can really just insult a person that you don't like or have an opinion that they don't agree with, and then, like Spencer said, you're just ostracized from an entire section of people who they blacklist you. They turn the public against you, and you get hate mail. I know that there are people who were part of the Black Lives Matter, not part of them, but they reported on them, such as Drew Hernandez, one of the frontline reporters that was in the crowds and kind of like disguised himself to get the first line information. I know that he was repeatedly censored. His videos were until he gained such a following that I guess they just kind of started allowing it because they realized that they were getting such a public outcry about the censorship of his content. But there was a lot of it at first when the riots first started last year. And he commonly received, I know he posted several times on Instagram, screenshots of messages to him that threatened him and his family, insulted him with various different slurs, and horrible, horrible things to be said against someone.
Right.
And that's pretty much a perfect example of what Spencer was saying right there.
Wow.
Yeah, it was horrible, and the fact that those things are happening in this country, that's really sad. Another really good example of censorship is the recent app. I'm not sure if anybody here has heard of it before. It's called Parler. It was put together by two conservative-leaning individuals who co-created or co-made or co-owned this app, and they had the strict belief that even though they were conservative, they believed strongly in the First Amendment, and there was going to be no censorship at all, except for obviously legally required stuff, keeping out inappropriate content, graphic stuff, and stuff like that.
Right.
So they had the most open and uncensored platform that I've ever seen before, and I quickly signed up and made an account on there.
And it's meant to be sort of a alternative to Twitter.
Yeah, alternative to Twitter, or maybe if you don't want Instagram, stuff like that, or Facebook, any of those things where you just don't want to be on there, but you still want to have a social media where you can see what's going on in the world without the news or whatever reason you want social media. And it was a really great app. Parler, once again, for anyone that hasn't heard of it. Though the problem was, though, the censorship came into play where Google, which is owned by Alphabet, Google came out and said that unless Parler started censoring the same kind of content that happens on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, where they would censor more conservative leaning and stuff like that. So they would censor these individuals. They were going to remove their app from the App Store, which goes against Google's the law with Section 230, where Google fulfill an odd little variation in there because of how public they are, but also they are also a private company. So there's a lot of iffy gray area in there. But what they did was, there's a lot of legal gray area in whether or not Google is a platform or some private company or everything, just because of everything that they do and everything they're involved in. But what they did was unacceptable in any instance. Right. In the end, they ended up. Yeah, go ahead, Spencer.
There's a distinction whether, sure, a private company without any laws has the right to censor certain things that are terrible, and in certain instances, if they identify as a publisher or whatever, then they have the right to kick Parler or whatever off their servers if they want, like Amazon did. But the problem comes down to the argument of the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. Just because the law says I can do a specific thing doesn't mean it's morally right. And I think that's another thing that we're dealing with, is that we have a moral obligation to not censor these people, but they are censoring them anyways, ignoring that moral obligation. That without a moral law, if we just have the law and we follow it, but we aren't necessarily being moral within it, then things are going downhill.
Yeah, sometimes it can even lead to a matter of how one person interprets it over another.
Right.
Which honestly is a sad thing, because obviously more towards the founding of this country, laws were not 500 pages like they are for the smallest little thing that goes through Congress now. I mean, everything has to be specified in every single little bitty detail to make one person doesn't violate one law or another, because it wasn't in there. There was a certain amount of common sense and understanding that I think is kind of sad doesn't exist, and that's also true of censorship, right? People should look at this and be like, okay, well, that's wrong. In the end, this whole situation went down where Google did end up censoring and removing Parler from their Play Store and from Android completely, so no Android phones can use or download the app. And then they also pressured Apple into the same thing, and Apple caved, and they gave Parler the same ultimatum. And then at the same time Google did, Apple also removed Parler from their App Store. And then also, if anyone who, well, I guess not many people unless they already know about it, if you already have the app, then you'll see on there clearly that you can no longer use the app. It says it cannot connect to internet, or having one error or another. I've seen several different screenshots of it, but the basis is that Apple and Google have both removed support of the app, so it will no longer function no matter what you do.
Well, and on top of that, Amazon has removed it off of its servers, which is an insane move if you think about it. The fact that they can censor not only a single person, right? They deleted President Trump off Twitter. They helped lead to the firing of Gina Carano. But the fact that they censored an entire social media platform with, I'm pretty sure, millions of people that were already on it is a terrifying thought.
Yeah, that's terrifying. And they got away with it. There was no action taken against Google or Apple or Amazon in terms of the illegality of this situation. Like I said, there's a lot of gray area. I'm not going to pretend to be an accomplished lawyer or anything where I could sit down and look through every single pertaining law on every single page and make sure I'm not missing anything. But I'm going to say in general, Google fulfills more of a platform orientation in terms of their apps, because they host many, many different apps for many different purposes. At one time, Google did also have their own social media called Google Plus. They have different chat. They have like Google Duos. They have Google Meet. They have Hangouts. All these different things, and they do kind of seem to be more of a platform, but it's owned by a more private company. So you have like Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat, and those are all owned by Facebook. And therefore Mark Zuckerberg. And those are a strict platform, right? They only follow the platform thing. They are social media platforms that are open and should be open in public, but they are not. They're censored, or they commit censoring rather. But Google also fulfills some of that same stuff. They have the private company kind of stuff, where they have the hardware and they also make the Android operating system, everything that Google does, the browser, Chrome. Google is massive. It would take forever just to name half the things that they do. But they also have things with their app store that kind of resemble more of a platform orientation. That's all I have to say about that, because I don't know enough about the law to create a full understanding of it. I'm not sure. I think it would be a job unto itself just to decipher laws about what Google has with, in terms of what legal actions they can carry out. But all in all, the actions that Google and Apple took were another clear example of censorship, except on a much more extreme level that, once again, faced no legal consequences whatsoever.
And on top of that, they essentially said, okay, listen, you don't like our rules that we're doing on Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or anything? Okay, go ahead and create your own platform. And a couple conservatives went, okay, sure, we'll create our own platform. You said that you'd be fine with that, so we're going to do it. And then they created their own platform. And then all these companies said, actually, we're going to not let you do that either. And at that point, it's a situation where you think, okay, I can either stick on the platform and be censored on a platform like Twitter. I can create my own, but then I'm going to be censored anyways. Where am I left to turn? There is nowhere to turn after that, unless I just quit social media and start a newspaper. There is no way to get your message out because you're getting censored at every turn.
Yeah, and even further, more than that, censorship has many different branches. There's things like ignorance, but censorship seems to have a kind of basic understanding where it is the... Oh, well, 1 second. I can actually look up the strict definition for censorship, so I don't sound like a bumbling idiot.
While you're doing that, I'm not sure what we're supposed to do at this point, because I have been following the updates on Parler. It sounds like, I think I read an article that said that Parler has their stuff up and running, but I checked and I wasn't able to get into the app. So I'm not sure where in that chain of command or chain of ability they're still getting blocked. But as far as I know, they're still getting blocked. And it's been, what, 2 months at this point?
Yeah, something like that. It's been a while. I do have the definition for censorship here, real quick. Let me play our message that just came in. Censorship is, quote, the suppression or prohibition of any parts of books, films, news, etc. that are considered obscene, politically unacceptable, or a threat to security. Now, the biggest issue that I see with that there is that these are not things that are obscene, politically unacceptable, or threats to security. A threat to security would be like saying saying you're going to hurt somebody or threatening their lives, right? That's what I would consider a threat to security or something like that. But that's not what's happening here. These are just people who have one opinion and another, but there are people on these platforms who are actually saying, or who are actually violating this and who should be censored, such as various famous actors. I'm forgetting a couple of their names at the moment, who said that we should kill President Donald Trump while he was still in office. By law, that one sentence right there is enough for that person to be tried with treason and jailed. And if you ask me, that should have been something that happened. But censorship, once again, another form of it, it shows that it is ignorant to the acts of those on the left, but very, very censoring of people on the right. You know, there's censorship of everything. If one person says something that could be considered too much against the narrative of the left, right? So if I were to go on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, any of these places like that, and I were to say something like, I believe President Biden is racist and that he is a bad person and he's never done anything for this country, I could easily be censored and hit with a tag from any various fact-checking organization where this is quote-unquote false. I think we can cover fact checks next after we listen to our quick message real quick here, unless you have anything to say, Censor.
Just on that topic, it's if these places identified as publishers, or they even identified and said, look, we're a left-wing social media platform and we're not going to hide it and we're going to censor what we think as a left-wing organization we don't want on here. If they did that, I would be more fine with their censorship because at least I know that they are being open and honest. But right now what they're doing is they're saying, no, it's a free platform. You can all come on here. And yet they're still acting like they only want one viewpoint on here.
Yeah, and that's a horrible thing. It's just deceit. I am always more open for people who are honest versus people who pretend one way or another when everybody knows it's a different way, right? If someone were to tell me that if someone were to tell me that they have a tendency with being angry with people over the smallest things, I'd be like, okay, well then I'll make sure that I don't anger you all the time, right? I'll make sure to be careful about the things I say so we don't have conflict, we don't have contention. But if they were to tell me I am the most peaceful person on earth, or I'm just a normal person, I don't really get angry or happy, I'm just kind of like a normal person, or I mean, not normal, but just kind of like middle line, right? They're not really emotionally high in either way, right? That's a lie. I would always rather someone tell me the truth about what they are and the nature of themselves than what they aren't, and that's something that's not happening. And that's actually not only unique to social media platforms, that's really common to a lot of what's happening with the left, not only in terms of censorship, but really everything, especially with the stuff that happened in the election. I mean, something to cover in a later topic, so I'm not going to speak a lot on that, but it really is kind of, it's sad to see, and it's disheartening. Go ahead with our message right here.
Hey, what do y'all think about Tom McDonald and his new video, his new song, Fake Woke? Y'all need to check that out.
I actually haven't heard about that.
I've heard about it, but I haven't listened to it yet. So I was doing that. I guess I'll go ahead and check that out right after we are done with today. We got another Go ahead and say what you
I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Tom McDonald, but he's been trending on YouTube for his music. A couple of his songs are "People So Stupid," "Canceled," and "No Lives Matter." And I believe it's got a great message. But what do you guys think about cancel culture?
So again, we can't speak to the songs, but we will definitely look those up because that's really funny that we had two messages on that.
Yeah, and as far as your right there on the end, your question about cancel culture, I believe cancel culture is morally and ethically wrong, unless it becomes something like, okay, for instance, the acts of Netflix recently with their horrible movie that they tried to push, the movie titled Cuties.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything else about it in a long time. I don't know if it ever actually did go on. It faced a lot of backlash.
Rightly so.
Yeah, and rightly so. And that was something where I guess you kind of call that cancel culture because there was a lot of people who said, we're not going to give you money anymore, and we're not going to use your platform if this is what you're going to do. And that's an instance where I would say cancel culture is something that is more okay, right? Because they're standing up for. It's not that they're standing up for their beliefs. It's they're standing up for something that should be universally and ethically wrong on all levels. If anyone wants to know what that movie was, look it up. I will not speak on it because it was a horrible, horrible thing that happened.
And that's a cancel culture in the terms that people canceled their subscriptions. Including me. I looked at that and I said, I am not going to give money to a company that allowed this to get put on their platform. And
yep.
Thankfully, one of the ways, right? There are two ways you can vote. You can vote with your voice, you can vote in elections, and you can vote with your money. Your money is a big vote. Where you spend your money shows what you care about and who you're going to support and what ideology a lot of the time you're going to support. And a lot of people looked at that and said, I'm not going to support this. This is not only wrong, it is evil that they are portraying this.
Yep, that's the perfect thing. So cancel culture in the terms that it currently embodies today, in many things, mainly coming from the left, really, because the left is intolerant about just about everything. I can't say one thing against another person, which would be actually exercising my freedom of speech. I can't say I dislike that person, or that this president is bad and this president is good. And that's where the cancel culture that is currently happening a lot of today, that's the cancel culture that I highly disagree with, because after saying that I dislike this or that, people will say, okay, well, then you're just going to be censored and removed and blacklisted from everything, like they attempted to do with Gina Serrano, where they attempted to cancel her from Disney Plus, and Disney attempted to blacklist her. That was an example of cancel culture, which actually did not pay out for them. That's cancel culture that I disagree with. But if there was cancel culture where, let's say, it was a platform that posted something that was conservative that I agree with, but another person doesn't, and they find it to be horrible and appalling, just like I find the Netflix's Cuties movie to be appalling, and they were to decide that, there was a mass thing where they decided, I think this is morally wrong and a horrible thing to say, this is a horrible movie or whatever, and it's not just limited to movies, it can be really anything, and that was against their beliefs strongly, that's a version of cancel culture that I would deem more acceptable, even if I don't agree with it, because they're standing up for a belief. But if I say, I like Donald Trump and I hate Biden, and they were to decide, oh, we're going to delete your accounts and block you from every social media platform, and we're just going to put all these tags all over you that say you're false, and we're just going to make you look like a really bad person, that's a really bad example of cancel culture, because First Amendment gives me the right to say, I don't like this person, and I do like this person, whether it's the president, whether it's my next door neighbor, whether it's anybody in the entire world. That is a right that the Constitution gives to me, and cancel culture in such an extreme term as that is something that I highly disagree with.
Well, and I would not support cancel culture if it went the other way. If it were conservatives saying, let's get rid of this leftist, I would not support that just because, they have a different view than me. I'm not going to cancel that. But
Exactly, yeah.
I think I don't know. I think canceling, quote unquote, someone, a lot of these cancels that come from this cancel culture is not because they actually did something morally reprehensible. It's rather because they made me feel bad. They made me, right? All these people are trying to get Gina Carano fired is what she said made me feel bad. It made me upset. It made me uncomfortable. And we have the right to say something that makes you uncomfortable. And you can't, under the First Amendment, at least, you're not supposed to cancel or try and get someone fired just because they made me uncomfortable. They have to actually do an action that is not covered underneath the First Amendment.
Exactly, yeah, and that's something that I think is the base reason for why cancel culture is unacceptable. Cancel culture, there's two different forms of it, like we've been covering here. There's cancel culture on the extreme forms where just someone says something that somebody else doesn't like, or something similar to that, and they decide we're never going to talk about this again. And there's cancel culture on more of an extreme end where it's like more serious things, such as like the Cuties movie, or if there was a conservative movie someone didn't agree with, and it was completely against their beliefs, right? That's something that I would say I defend your right as to say you have the freedom of choice, right? So I defend your right to say that I don't want to support this, or I don't want to be a part of this, or I don't want this person here anymore. You can say that, but that doesn't mean it should happen, right? If anyone kind of gets the gist of what I'm saying there.
Yeah.
It's really is a case-by-case basis. Obviously, being conservative, I think that some conservative movies are awesome, right? I think that that's something that's really cool. Someone on the left may think that they are a violation of nature or something like that. I don't know. But that is their opinion. They're allowed to have that opinion. Now, whether or not that is something should be canceled is something to be decided on a case-by-case basis. Cuties was something that I definitely deem unacceptable, not just from my beliefs, but it's also legally unacceptable because of its content. And
right.
I will not speak to that, saying that again,
You're
because
straying into that gray territory where, okay, listen, this is supposed to be a platform that caters to normal, clean content, and you're really trying to push it here.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was, once again, I can speak to that. It was something that I don't even really want to ever think about it again. I'm appalled that was something that, especially from a movie service that I've always thought was awesome. I mean, everybody likes Netflix, right? I mean, but they did that, and that was a bit of a letdown. I think that's something that's been happening a lot lately, finding out that people are biased one way or another, and then someone's like, "Wow, that's kind of a letdown. I didn't know that." I don't really understand, honestly, in terms of cancel culture and censorship. I think it also is worth being well mentioned. I don't really understand where it became illegal to hurt someone's feelings. Because in a time not too long ago, if someone said something that offended you, what was the solution? Walk it off and ignore it, because that's what a mature adult person should do, right?
Well, and our adult person also listens enough to what someone says to think, okay, is what this person's saying because they're crazy, because they don't like me, or because there's actually something I need to change here? Because if there's something that you need to change, right? If I say, listen, I'm not trying to be too mean, but you need to brush your teeth, that's something that you need to do. I mean,
yeah,
so
exactly. Or go ahead, Censor.
You can't just get offended at every criticism you get, because otherwise you're not going to grow. There is no growth in that.
Yeah, right. For instance, if you have things online where someone says, for instance, as a Christian, I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. I do not support gay marriage, but I don't mean I hate gay people, right? I
Right.
love all children of God, but that doesn't mean that I will like walk up and be like, "Hey, you want to be my best friend and hang out every single hour of all the day?" That's not what I'm going to do. That doesn't mean that I have to support them. That doesn't mean that I have to vehemently hate them either, right? There's a middle line there where you can accept that they exist and that is their opinion and they're allowed to have that, especially in the Constitution. But that doesn't mean that you have to agree with it, right? And that's something that seems to just have lost its meaning, especially with the left side, where either you agree with us or you're a horrible human being, right? Either you agree that um, Black Lives Matter is a good organization, or that Donald Trump is a horrible president, or you're a horrible human being and we don't like you at all. And you cannot like me, that is fine. I do not care if people on the left do not like me, because you know what? In all honesty, I don't really like them that much either. But that doesn't mean that I wish harm to every single one of them.
And
Which is
the
something that gets skewed.
Yeah. And harkening back to our show yesterday, the Constitution and enshrines that we are all endowed by God with abilities and an inherent worth because we're children of God, right? That inherent worth, especially back, 200 years ago, was apparent, and it was something that everyone set as a standard. When I'm talking to someone, I don't see them immediately as, okay, they're a Republican, they're a Democrat, they're this, they're that. When I see someone, my first thought should be, when I'm talking to them and maybe arguing, remembering, okay, this person, it has an inherent worth, just like I do, that they are a child of God, just like I am. And so, in that term, we are exactly the same in our amount of worth. And so, I shouldn't be screaming in the face of this person. I should be treating them as a sibling, right? A good sibling relationship is one where maybe you have some arguments or a discussion, but you're not screaming at the other one.
Yeah, and this is something that I'm not going to say that I am absolutely perfect in, because there are people that it would not bother me. I would not lose a single wink of conscience if I never had to see them again in my entire life. Or if I have, or maybe I have really bad opinion of one person or another. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I'm saying that this is something that people should keep in mind to work towards, and it's something that's been completely lost. Because now anybody can be insulted, and it is the worst thing in the world at the drop of a hat. If I say that I don't support gay people, then that means that I hate every single gay person in the world. That's not true, but it's something that commonly happens, and I will say that it's more so to the left. You don't have that. You don't see that really happening on the right, where someone says, "I don't like." I don't know. Maybe they don't like their best friend who's conservative. That doesn't. The right doesn't go, "Oh, okay. Well, then you just hate every single conservative person in the world." That's not really how that works. But that is definitely something that's more one side over the other. And that's more focused towards the left, and there are outliers on both sides. And I just wanted to, I'm going to keep saying that there are outliers, because you don't want to make it look like you're speaking in absolutes all the time. But there are some things where that should be spoken in absolutes, and it's absolutely bizarre and, in my opinion, unacceptable that people say, you insulted me, and so now I think of you as less than dirt, or we're going to commit acts of censorship or cancel culture against one person over another. People are allowed to say things, and to tie back to our beginning today with Gina Serrano, she didn't even say anything that really offended anybody. And honestly, I cannot accurately comprehend, because I don't understand.
Nothing she said was unreasonable.
Yes, that's true too. I honestly
chosen to get offended at her, but what she said.
That's why it makes me. Yeah, that's what makes it hard for me to understand some things that happen on the left, just as I'm sure it makes it that some things that some of my beliefs are hard to understand by people on the left, just as I don't understand some of theirs. And that's something that goes both ways. I don't understand what she did wrong that makes it that it was so wrong for her to say, because I'm looking at this with more of a common sense thing, and from my point of view, it looks exactly. And honestly, I do believe this to be the true point of view, where she said something that was just an accurate recollection of history that should have been compared to today. Because if people don't compare history to the modern day, then why study history at all? And why do the whole we need to understand and study history so we're not doomed to repeat it? It doesn't matter if nobody brings it up, right? If everyone's too scared to talk about history, then yes, we are definitely doomed to repeat it.
Yep.
We do have a message real quick here. Go ahead and play that real quick.
Do you think cancel culture is a predominantly Western thing? Because you never hear of countries like Brazil cancelling a movie star. You never hear of Japan having a riot because someone said something that they shouldn't have done. It's a real Western thing, and it's almost becoming like a religion, this cancel culture. I don't know if you guys agree with what I mean, but it's a very Western thing. It's a bit weird.
That's actually a great point in terms of the that it's becoming almost a religious thing. I really think it is becoming a religion of it's an extension of the religion of the self, right? Worshipping yourself, thinking that yourself is the ultimate good, and it's an extension of that in terms of this person made me feel bad and it made me upset, so I am going to cancel them, and it's almost like a religious ceremony in that regard of they do it, they have a certain ritual of, okay, it made me offended, now I'm going to go through this action of trying to cancel them.
Yeah, and I have to say even further, I do believe that what you say, cancel culture is a more Western thing. At least that's how it's portrayed. I haven't heard that many things like this happening across the pond over in the UK and things like that. I don't know a lot about what goes on over there. Honestly, I don't understand a lot of goes on over there. But here in the U.S., especially, I would have to say that cancel culture and censorship in general are two terms that are relatively newer, that have more of an applicable thing. And maybe if they aren't new, they're more applicable, especially for social media and the current digital age, where people can really just say, I don't want to hear what you have to say, so we're going to make it hard for you to do anything, because in all honesty, the world currently revolves around a digital age. So if someone says something, they could just say, I don't like it. And in the United States, especially recently with COVID, and even more so than that, with the political divide that's been widened by various different instances, I will say that cancel culture is something that's more predominant here in the U.S. And it's sad to see, because America is a country that allows. There's a reason that we're called the melting pot, and that's from immigration, but it's also for culture and for opinion and for what people believe. Religion is for really everything, and there should be an acceptance, a realization that the other side isn't the reincarnation of evil, that people just seem to believe everything is. Now, I believe that some people are much worse than others. I currently have a significantly negative view of President Biden. I have a negative view of AOC, Pelosi, Schumer, of the owners of these tech giants that censor people. I have negative views of these people, but I don't wish immense bodily harm on them, which is something that I have to say is more so something that you see more on the right, because we commonly understand and accept and love the Constitution, which acts as a document that just constantly tells us to respect the other side. Also, there's more of an acceptance of what people believe. And while you would see that as something that's said, it's on the left, right, where you have people who say, we're the acceptant right, the left, right? We're the tolerant left, right? We believe in all people. We accept everybody. It doesn't matter what they believe. That's where you see commonly a lot of people who are LGBTQ. That's over on the left commonly. You have that kind of stuff over on the left, and that's because they say we are accepting and open, but in reality, what it really is listen to what we have to say, obey everything we say, have the same views as us, or we're going to treat you as an enemy and less than human.
They're tolerant with everything that they agree with, but as soon as you say something that they don't agree with, I mean, take Mitt Romney. Right now, when he voted for the impeachment of President Trump, the second one and the first one, he's great. The left thought he was great. He's buddy. But as soon as he does something slightly conservative that they don't like, they're going to turn back on him and say, no, we don't like you. So that's the tolerant left that is tolerant with everything they agree with, which, if you think about the definition of tolerance, isn't tolerance at all, because being tolerant is meaning accepting that people have different views than you.
Yeah, it's being open, and when you only accept people when they believe what you say, then that's the exact opposite of open. That's called being closed-minded, where you only believe what people believe when people believe similar to you. And I think the difference between the right and the left is that while I may not believe and agree with some of the things that I disagree with, I as a Christian, I don't believe in LGBTQ. The difference is that, I say our positions were reversed. The left would hate those people, right? They would hate them vehemently. We don't like you. You're horrible. We're going to cancel you. We're going to censor you. You're not going to be allowed to do anything. We're going to make it hard for you to believe in what you believe in, right? On the right, it's, I don't believe the same as you. I don't really want to hang out with you all the time, but I'm not going to say that you're a despicable, worthless human being. And I'm not going to sit here and say that we want to make sure nothing you say ever is sees the light of day. That's the difference between the right and the left in terms of censorship and cancel culture. And so the political divide, which I have to say, I think there's political divide is widened from both sides. Both sides play a part in widening that political divide.
Yeah,
I personally believe that the left has more severe because of their aggressive and intolerant points of view that make it difficult to try and heal the gap when we have our beliefs didn't change. And so they just believe that since our beliefs didn't change, they don't need to change how they believe about us. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, and touching the fact that other countries don't necessarily have as much of a cancel culture, that it looks a lot like that, but I think a lot of that boils down to that we have a First Amendment here, which guarantees almost all speech, whereas in those countries, you have much more limited speech to begin with. So I think you talked about like a movie star that you never heard a movie star that got canceled, but in those cultures where the free speech isn't as inherent, yeah, it's not as free, it's not as inherent and enshrined. In those places, the government or the people have already done that amount of censorship before it reaches anyone else. So by the time it reaches people, it's already gone through that sort of censorship and that canceling where it says, no, you're not allowed to say this against the government, or you're not allowed to say this against this company. it's already gone through that. So by the time it reaches people, there's a lot less for people to get upset about or to try and cancel, because a lot of it has already been canceled.
Yeah, and there's not as much argument because there's not a right that exists in the first place. In the U.S., there's a lot of upheaval about First Amendment, Second Amendment, Constitution in general, one side versus the other, and that really just comes from the ability for each side to have the right of free speech, but people disagree on how to let that be. I think more on the right is a common thing, especially with people who are very, very strict constitutionalists, and they the Constitution is their entire life. That's just how they live everything. That's something that's there, especially on the right. I don't think I've ever heard of a leftist constitutionalist, but that they believe in the free speech and they believe in this stuff. The disagreement is that the left believes that it should be restricted in one way or another, and the right believes in letting it be open, right? I believe in free speech for everybody, as long as it doesn't violate another person's life, another person's rights. The end. Problem solved. Their rights are what's guaranteed in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, right to freedom of speech, right to religion, the pursuit of peace, happiness, right to life. These things are what their rights are, and there's a disagreement on whether or not we should allow someone to say that something would offend another person. I personally believe that people who get offended at the drop of a hat by something someone else says isn't mature enough to handle anything and probably shouldn't be handling stuff, especially people in the government. It amazes me how they ever got there when they get offended at the drop of a hat. I mean, I don't know how you would get into such a tough position in the world where you have people who literally line up on the Democrat and Republican, and then if you are the other side, they don't like you very much, or they hate you, depending on what side it is.
Oh, and I'll add one more comment before we play this clip. But people that get offended at the drop of the hat, there are a lot of hats being dropped, and when you get offended at every little thing, all of a sudden someone looks at you and says, okay, hold on. This person is crying because they're crying at 3 different posts on social media today. And when people look at you, they don't see a brave warrior who's fighting against these people that are posting. They look at you and they say, this person just can't handle the reality of life that other people are going to disagree with them. They can't handle the alternative views. And it kind of weakens your position that you are getting offended at every little possible thing, rather than saving that offense for when it's actually warranted, when someone actually makes a call for violence, or when someone actually compares, my neighbor driving up my driveway to the Holocaust, right? Get offended at the things that actually are worth getting offended at.
Exactly. Yep. And that's something it's something that comes up in conversation about censorship and cancel culture, because cancel culture and censorship commonly revolve around one person feeling like they've been insulted or their feelings were hurt about one thing or another. I'm not too concerned about one person's individual feelings. They need to shake it off, wake up, and just move on. But if it were something that violates their rights, things like hate speech or racism, those are things that I'd be like, okay, yeah, those are not covered under the First Amendment, right? Those are things where it's like you're now interfering with their right to happiness and their right to life.
Yeah.
Do you have a clip real quick? Go ahead and play that real quick.
Yeah, so I'm a right-wing conservative here in England, and it's exactly the same as you guys over there. Censorship is rife. We're told on a daily basis that we have to think a certain way, or you're going to potentially, lose jobs and this, that, and the other. And from what I've seen with you guys as well, with the way that they tried to spin in the insurrection, which us Brits have been laughing at, because on our news it didn't look like an insurrection. It looked like paid for actors, in my opinion, probably by Pelosi and crew. But yeah, I think this whole cancel culture. Do you not think it's weird that cancel culture is only prevalent in majority white countries? Everywhere else around the world, they just crack on with it. In Africa, they've got other problems to deal with. Maybe cancel culture is because we're so damn comfortable with our lives, the fact that we've got running water and hot food downstairs. Is that the best thing we can do with our spare time? Is that we have to look good to the neighbour? I don't know, man. It's just messed up.
That's actually a really good point. Is that especially with like the BLM Antifa riots, people are designed to have a purpose in life, right? If you have a purpose, then your life has meaning. You can go throughout each day knowing that you're trying to fulfill that purpose. And the left has pushed a lot of, we don't need religion, we don't need God. And when you don't have God, you don't have religion in your life, suddenly you worship yourself or you worship something else. You have to find that purpose. And I think in a lot of Western countries where we have it so good, like you're talking about, we have running water, we have nice warm houses in this winter that has gone all the way from Texas to Michigan. We are so comfortable that we need to find something to fight. And they're just taking it out on, well, this is my cause now to fight against this person who said something mean. And, those other countries that are in a much worse position look at us and they say, okay, listen, someone made you mad, someone made you upset. I'm trying
Grow
to
up.
Grow up. I'm trying to keep myself alive right now. I am working, 10-hour days in the fields. I am doing various other things. Getting offended is the least of my worries, so you need to grow up.
Yeah, especially here. And that's even true of certain communities here in the U.S. that are more poor than others, or even individuals who choose to live without running water. I've watched a couple of various documentaries or shows about these individuals, and they just seem to have more of a specific lifestyle where they're more worried about providing for themselves or their families. They're not so much worried about if someone comes along and insults them. You see on TV shows commonly portrayed, someone insults someone and it just, they might say 2, 3, 4 things, and then someone just decides, oh, well, I'm just going to punch him in the face. or something like that. And you're just like, it makes for good entertainment. But in reality, when you think about it, you're like, why would you do that? Like, come on, walk away or something like that. I mean, there's a great big world to go to. I will say that is, I guess, less true here with COVID. And all that's all over the world, so maybe that makes things a little more difficult. But in general, really, I don't understand the whole cancel culture because I don't understand censorship, and I don't understand censorship because I believe people should just stop being offended.
Yeah, and I mean, getting offended is a way to say, look at me, I am a righteous person, but there are much bigger deals. There are much bigger worries in life than getting offended, or there are so many more worries where a lot of people deal with the problem of where's my next meal coming from. Help those people. Don't get offended because someone said something that made you feel upset. Do something to actually help people rather than just get offended and signal that, hey, I'm offended. You need to actually go out and help people rather than just sit on the sidelines and complain.
Yep. That's a very good point. Got a message real quick here.
Speaking of hot food, I have to actually go and eat my tea now, which you guys would know as dinner because it's 6:32 p.m. over here in England. But I've really enjoyed listening to the show for the last hour, even though I should have been working, believe it or not. But I'm be up for an open debate or a conversation with you guys as an English conservative, slightly different, but probably same views as you guys. So private message me. I don't know how you do it, but I'd love to have an hour's chat with one of you guys. It'd be interesting. But yeah, great show, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm glad to have you on.
Yeah, enjoy your dinner. I'm glad that we are intelligent and entertaining enough to distract from work.
Yeah, we're always happy after. We're always like, we're congratulating each other after the show ends. That went really great. We're so happy with that. But during the whole show, we're like, man, I really hope I don't sound like an idiot.
Yeah, and
I do believe in. I'm a human person. I'm not perfect, right? So that's something that I try to keep. I definitely I say that a couple times. You know, like I'm not perfect. I do, as I believe this. I may not exercise it perfectly, but you know, I love our whole format we got going on here with everybody that's listening. I love the live show because I love listening to people and I love talking and having natural conversation with you guys. So yeah,
and
please put in 2 cents. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice having someone not only outside of our political view, but someone actually outside of our country who's able to look at things with a completely different perspective.
Yeah. And I like what he said about the Capitol riots, because that's another good example of censorship right there. Because censorship also extends to the omission of certain information, which for anybody who's had a parent who did a good job parenting them, they would have learned that a half truth is a full lie. But for you had different news organizations and then people who were reporting on the Capitol riots, and you saw them just omitting whole entire things about it. And then afterwards, when they covered it extensively by so many different people and several different times on different organizations, you also heard them that they would say, "Man, I can't believe that this person did that," or "Wow, look at what happened here," this, that, or the other. But during that whole riot, there was actually a lot of peace. I watched the whole thing live from, I think there's 3 different channels. One of them was Fox News, one of them was Newsmax. And I just watched it from YouTube, but they were streaming for the whole entire process of everything that happened that night before the riot, why they were all there in the first place, for the confirmation of the Electoral College votes. And we were watching whole groups of people just walk through the building or stand outside, and they were doing absolutely nothing. They weren't inciting violence. I actually saw a couple people even talking to the police. I mean, there were cops who would walk through the middle of the crowd. They didn't even have their hands on their guns or tasers or whatever, ready to take someone down in case somebody came after them. They were like walking through as casual as you would see me walking through a mall or anything like that. I mean, they didn't feel threatened, but the way that you saw several people painting the picture is that they used ignorance and the omission of fact to portray the image that these riots were obscenely violent, that there was, and yes, it was horrible, some of the things that happened up there during that whole situation. But the majority of the people, the vast majority of the people, the million or so people that were there was a very, very, very small, like it was like 200 or 300 people maybe that actually entered the Capitol building. Everybody else was outside. And those people inside were the people that everybody heard about. And even smaller portion of those people were the people who committed violence. But you have people who try to bring this to light and say, wait a second, I was there, or wait a second, I was in the crowd and I never even entered the Capitol building. Why is everybody condoning me and calling me a terrorist and crap like that? Why is everybody calling me evil? And these people were censored. They were, I remember seeing a thing about a father and his daughter who were both at the Capitol riot. I don't remember his name. I think it was Daniel, maybe. I saw the post on Twitter, and he said that he was fearful for his daughters and his life because he had posted pictures of being outside the Capitol building during the riot, and on his social media, talking about, posting saying we're at this great peaceful protest or whatever, yada yada yada, and they hadn't seen the news yet that was portraying them like villains. And afterwards, he received several death threats from various individuals who threatened his life and the life of his daughters, said that they know where he lives. And I'm just looking at this going, what on earth? And people, once again, there was Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, and then different news platforms who censored this, and they didn't even talk about it. Or if they did, they tried to degrade the man. They attacked him personally. These things are things that, in a great country like America, where we should have freedom of speech, these are things that really set off some alarm bells for me. Where, why on earth is this happening? It's sad that this is happening.
It's America.
This shouldn't be happening. It's America, right? We stand for democracy. We have the strongest constitution in the world, and we have the First Amendment, which is completely unique, guaranteeing the right to freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, freedom of the press. You have these things that's unique to this country, and like, we're supposed to be amazing, and then you have people who are threatening the life of a father and his daughter because he was in a political peaceful protest. Like, what on earth? And some of these people,
on top of that, they're using this to not only paint all the people that were at the Capitol. They're not only using the few to paint those people. They're saying, look, these are Trump supporters. Therefore, the 74 million Trump supporters around the country are also like these, and we need to ostracize them, and we need to bully them, and we need to do all these things against every single Trump supporter. And it doesn't matter if only a fraction of a percent were actually the ones that did anything slightly, even a fraction of them were just there. But because a small group did that, they look at it and they say, well, let's make sure we know that 74 plus million Americans also get the same treatment that we're giving these people.
We also talked about this in our first episode, and we talked about how there were also those inside the Capitol riots who were in that very even smaller proportion of those who were inside, this even smaller proportion who were those who were violent. We talked about how there were individuals who were found to be antagonizers that were members of Antifa. And I'm not going to talk about that, but it's another good example that further just presents evidence that censorship doesn't have a boundary line. Some people seem to believe, and I guess it's on both sides, that we can let this one little thing slide, or we can let this slide, or we can do this, and it's not going to really affect us as a whole. But to make an analogy, if you were to take a knife, right, or you were to take, or let's say, and to be less violent, let's say you're standing on the stairs, okay, and you do some dumb trick that hurts you, right? You fall and break a bone, right? If you keep falling and breaking bones, eventually you're going to break every single bone in your body. So a little bit does matter when people don't stop doing it. So people keep committing, especially on the left, keep committing acts of censorship and of cancel culture and the omission of fact, and they are portraying false images. They're lying blatantly, and they're gathering people to their side, and these people would say, oh, well, censorship is good for this, or it's good for that, or we should use it for one thing or another. Or maybe they are people who haven't been previously convinced, but they do believe that censorship is good for things that violate the rights of another, which is a good thing, but then they let it slide further. You see what I'm saying? A little bit, it's a slippery slope. Yeah, censorship needs to be confined to one thing only. If it violates the rights of another individual, that should be censored and it should be canceled. Okay, that is things that should be under that jurisdiction of censorship. Anything further than that, whether it's insults, whether it's the omission of facts, stuff like that, there should be straight fact, and then you can separate your fact with separate opinions. So when I see a news thing from CNN, Fox News, New York Times, whatever, and I'm reading these things that are portrayed like they're fact, but I'm reading through it, and I was watching this whole incident at Capitol Hill live. I saw everything that happened, and I literally am reading articles not just from left-wing things, but also from somebody who's portrayed themselves as right, such as the Fox News, and they are lying about it. It's not the truth. I'm like, I watched that. That didn't happen. That person didn't attack them. This didn't happen in that room. That wasn't even there. And that is another act of the omission of fact, of censorship, of cancel culture, because they are canceling individuals who speak the truth and they are lying about it, or they're censoring, and you have all these different factors that just play into a constitutional violation.
Well, and I have a friend who actually I wrote his quote down because it was very poignant. He said, if we censor things, then where do we draw the line? How far does it go before we can't say what we want? And that is a great way to summarize the point, is that if you draw the line at, okay, calls to violence or outright things that are under the Constitution not allowed, if you draw it there and you leave it there, then okay, it's good. But as soon as you move the goalposts farther, where you say, well, you can't say anything racist, or well, you can't say this or that, and suddenly we say, whoa, our line has shifted, and everyone says, oh, it's fine, it won't shift again. But then it gets shifted again, where it says, well, now we won't allow this political opinion. And then we say, it just shifted again. Oh, it's fine, it won't shift again. And then it keeps getting shifted inch by inch until suddenly we look and we say, our goalpost was a mile away, and now we're here. And there's almost no way for us to get back to where that goalpost was, because we have shifted so much and given so much ground that we have to argue within this tiny little sliver of room that we've been allowed.
Yep, that's very true. We do have 4 messages here, so we'll have the first one.
So, as someone who's from outside of the US looking in, it seems that a lot of the corruption and other problems like abuses of power are very rampant in the US, but there doesn't seem to be very many people willing to do anything about this, and this seems to affect you regardless of whether you're Republican or Democrat. So I was wondering, like, why do you think that is? Why do you think people aren't, trying to actually actively solve this problem, or why it's just not picked up in the media, or why it's not that, or why is that the case?
Why it's not picked up in the media right off the bat: cancel culture and censorship. You have people who are backed by some of these.
The media is willing to hold the politicians' water, and they're willing to not report on the things that the politicians don't want them to report on.
It boils down to money and a lot of things, and there's the comment saying money makes the world go round. But in the instance of the United States, we have a constitution and so many laws that work to prevent corruption. But then you have the private citizen or private companies where you would think these people would work for the guarantee of their constitutional rights that they wouldn't get anywhere else in the world. And for some reason, they believe that their rights are worth trading for an extra $1 or $2, right? You have the media who's making money from politicians when they portray a false narrative. And I can't present evidence for this. I don't have someone's pocketbook laid out right in front of me where I can say, Nancy Pelosi transferred $100 to CNN on this day at this time. And then something after this happened and they said this or that. I can't say that. I don't have the pocketbook in front of me. But if you watch the way that corruption is taught, corruption occurs, and the people that it occurs in, and then you watch the news organizations or the people and individuals who might be either in the news organizations or on social media who just present narratives, the rest of the country, the vast majority of the United States, does not care a lot about the news. They're not daily news listeners. Many of them don't even vote. We know that's something that obviously was brought up heavily in the last election, where we had the highest number of voters that we've had in, I'm not sure if it was ever or just a long time. I can't remember which one of the two it was. But that's why we have, that's one of the reasons we have corruption in the United States, is it's about money. I personally, if it were a choice between giving me $1 million and giving me the ability to practice my religion and say what I want, to own a firearm, to I already said say what I want, but to believe what I want. These simple things that you would consider that are taken for granted by much of the country. If it were a choice between $1 million and that, I would take those rights any day of the week, and it's not even a question. $1 million in a country where I'm not allowed to say what I want, or I'm not allowed to practice the religion that I believe in, or I'm not allowed to own a gun, which some people may seem trivial, but to me, I personally really enjoy shooting, not to mention its constitutional importance. Just things like that I don't understand the difference, so I can't really speak to why corruption exists, because to me, it doesn't process in my brain.
I think a lot of that comes from like President Trump was trying to do, drain the swamp. There are a lot of politicians. First of all, I'm glad that we have these outside of America perspectives that are able to kind of give some good insights. But I think that a lot of it boils down to, like you were talking about, that there are politicians on both sides that are part of the swamp, and they don't want to lose their power. They don't want to lose the power and the money that they have, and so they're not going to protect the rights of the citizens. They're just going to try and keep that power to themselves. And I think that's a lot where that corruption comes from, is that we may have two sides to the political aisle, but both sides are still looking at it in terms of how much power can I get, and that is what is a lot of what is leading to that corruption. And
well, two things. One, I have to say that oh, go ahead, Spencer.
I'll just mention that and that unholy relationship between the media and the government is another big thing where it pushes, and it allows the corruption to be hidden a lot more, because the media says, yes, we'll cover your corruption, you can do what you want, and we'll only put a good light on you.
Yep, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say the both sides of the aisle. There's corruption on both sides of the aisle. There's corruption from the Democrats. There's corruption from the Republicans. There's a power lust from both sides, and I think that's part of human nature. But I do think it's important to note that the common everyday American is not corrupt like these people are, or maybe even most of the time doesn't even believe in it. Sometimes isn't even aware of it. You have people who just believe, people who are Republican because everybody they know is Republican, so they do the same thing. But they don't really have one opinion or another. They haven't looked it up. That's one of the issues that you have, like you just mentioned. I'm sorry, I forgot your name already. Where you have corruption because people don't open their eyes to understand why the corruption is there. Even though there are shows like ours, and there are shows like Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, you have something that I would think makes it very prevalent. All the different shows, all the different people and shows that reported on the riots of Black Lives Matter, that would bring attention to the need to be politically aware and to have at least a little bit of activity and knowledge. But an ignorance and an appreciation for a cushiony life that a lot of the rest of the world doesn't enjoy has led to the laziness of many individuals in this great country, where they're just like, I don't really need to worry about that. I live here. I have the rights. I don't need to care about that.
Yeah. All right.
Another recording.
Can we talk about the fact that we're finally finding out that Nancy Pelosi was possibly behind the reason there was no protection for the Capitol? Whoa! Can we talk about how Gavin Newsom is pretty much going to be out of office? How Cuomo pretty much will be out of office soon? Can we talk about how the Democrats are going to turn on themselves and how hot it is in that kitchen? Oh boy, it's getting hot in that kitchen. I would not want to be one of them.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of and this isn't really a part of our topic, but we can definitely cover it later. But I'll speak on it real quick. There seems to be a lot of contention with the leaders of the Democratic Party right now. Revelation that they committed things that are they committed acts that violate their duties, or they've lied about certain things. And the best part is that it's censorship and cancel culture can be fought easily if it is made available if the information is made available by one means or another to the vast majority of people. The problem is that censorship and cancel culture make it difficult to get that information out to people. If everybody knows one thing is evil, or if, let's say, everybody in the whole world everybody in the whole world was watching the Capitol protest as it happened live, and they all saw the same videos that everybody else saw, then it'd be very hard to go back later and write their own narrative by omitting facts and using censorship and cancel culture. But when the difficulty is that not everybody was watching that live, not everybody saw the information, and so these people have to rely on other sources to get the information. And these sources can be opinionated. They can prevent false information. They can use censorship against people who disagree with them, which, I mean, you even see that happen on mainstream talk shows where people will just straight up speak over another person until they cut them off and get them out of the show, because they were going to say something that they didn't agree with.
And that's an in-time live form of censorship where you look at it and you say, this person is not letting this other person talk, and they're just talking over and they're making noise so that no one can hear what they're trying to say.
Yeah, that'd be like if someone came on our recording here today and I didn't like what they were saying, so not because of our reasoning behind, we try to keep a clean show, so not because they were cussing, but because I didn't agree with what they were going to say, I either started screaming so loud into my mic that none of you guys could hear anything, or I just clicked cancel and didn't let them talk at all. That's exactly what it is. People, they just block out another person to the point that their views and opinions can't be presented to anybody, and that makes it difficult, if not impossible, to get the good word out, right? It makes it impossible. It makes it difficult or impossible for people to know and have the full spectrum of the facts behind something like the election fraud of last year, when there were and are so many individuals and organizations who fight it so fiercely that it's just not true. It's just not true. It was the truest election. It was the truest election we've ever had. But you see a little bit of the hypocrisy going on with that in 2016 when they said it was a rigged election, and now all of a sudden we have the most secure election. You just have an inconsistency of fact that makes it visible to see if someone does enough work that there is censorship occurring. But the problem is that a lot of our country's population, a lot of our citizenry, does not care enough. They remain neutral. And that's one thing that we try to work for on this show, is that by being on an app such as Stereo, We try to bring to light what's happening. And I am absolutely all for anybody in this right now that disagrees with me. Please go ahead and put stuff into our. Please put messages in. I'd love to hear you guys. I'd love to. Whether you agree or disagree, say something. Because the facts are, in order to get the facts, you have to hear both sides of the view. So you got to have all the information, and it's simple like that. I don't want to censor anybody, so please just keep it clean and talk.
And that's another thing about censorship is that if we only allowed conservative points of view on our show, if we heard a message and it started saying something liberal and we said, nope, we're going to mute this person, not because they're cussing, but because we disagree with them, that creates an echo chamber where our views aren't challenged, and the person who is challenging our views isn't able to hear what we think, and we aren't able to enlighten everyone, right? Everyone grows from that challenge between two views as long as they're willing to grow. And that that challenge and that ability to hear two different points of views is what will help people see the world better, right? I'm sure there are some things that I see in a certain light or perspective that are probably not the most accurate to truth. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people watching this show that have different views than me that I would like to change in order for them to come closer to the truth. Touching the recall Gavin thing real quick, and then we can go to another message. Do not go to recallgavin2020.com. They have met their required goal for recalling him, but they are trying to hit their 2 million as their final goal. So do not go to recallgavin2020.com.
Okay. Go ahead and move on to another message here.
I have a question about the whole Parler thing getting deplatformed and like what the legality of that is, and like all of these companies like Amazon Web Services and all that stuff like working together to try to take down Parler. I don't is that legal? Is there something people can do to like get back at Amazon and all these big companies for doing this?
The inherent issue with that is that many of these companies, Apple, the companies that committed these acts against Parler was Apple, Google, and Amazon. 3 of the biggest companies that have ever existed in the world. They put like the East India Trading Company almost to shame with the amount of money and power that they have, right? Now, obviously, they don't own whole swaths of people and land with slavery and stuff, but their
control of information and the amount of information that they have their hands in is something that Hitler and all the dictators wish they had. They wish they could control or have their hand in all of the information that these 3 companies do have their hand in.
Yep, and the problem with that is that when you have companies that are so massive and have so much money, I mean, they have entire legal teams. I mean, their legal teams are massive. And so nobody can challenge what happened there unless it were to come straight from the government, right? If the government were to come in and say, this is a constitutional violation that you guys did this, it's against section, was it 230?
Yeah.
Yeah, if it were against section 230, you guys violated your ability to, you shouldn't have done that. That's wrong. You're not allowed to do that. That has to come from them because the government holds power higher than the company. But no companies are able, those companies, I mean, they're so massive that if, let's say, Apple were to decide that they're going to let Parler come back and then they wanted to butt heads with Google against it, the 2 of them are so massive, the legal battle between them would be infinitesimal. I mean, it would last forever. It would be never ending. So what they did, I don't have the legal knowledge to dive real deep into how everything works with that. I do have to say what they did on a moral level was completely unacceptable.
Yes, it was morally reprehensible.
Yeah, such a blatant example of cancel culture. You don't do what we said you're going to do, and you're not going to censor millions of people. Well, then we're gonna cancel culture against you, and we're just gonna remove you completely. Whether or not that's legal for them, nobody can really challenge them. No company is big enough to challenge Amazon, Google, and Apple. I mean, Microsoft, it would be the next biggest, or maybe it's bigger than one of them. I'm not going to send just like a leaderboard in there or something like that. But they're one of the big ones in there. You got Facebook, but these companies, they aren't going to fight against Google or Apple or Amazon, mostly because they agree with what they're doing, right? They're just saying they would commit the same acts of cancel culture.
Now, we the people, as a collective, can fight against them, and one of the ways you can do that is you can. It may seem small, but if you get enough people, you can write a letter, you can write an email to these companies and say, "Hey, listen, I'm not going to buy from you. I'm not going to subscribe to your service or whatever because what you're doing is wrong." And the kind of what we were talking about earlier, you can go back and watch that once this is done. Is the public votes by their money. They vote by their dollar, and they look at things and they say, "I'm not going to support that." And so we, the people, can fight against it. And actually, Steven Crowder is fighting against it on a much bigger scale. He is suing Facebook, not on this particular issue, not on Parler, but he is suing Facebook for taking down one of his live streams. And so don't give up hope. There is hope, and there is a way to fight against these without being there and thinking that all is lost.
Yeah, I'm not saying give up hope, because there's always hope. I'm just saying that in order for the people to come together against this, there has to be unity. There has to be a realization that what they did was wrong. And in the current political divide, that makes it difficult. So it's possible, but to answer your question, what they did was wrong. What they did, in my mind, was illegal as far as Section 230. But I'm not 100% certain that that applies to them because they run a certain gray area with the App Store, where it's not a publisher, but I guess it's not really a platform either, but it resembles more of a platform. It's kind of a gray area there because they control what can be on and what can be off in the terms of them being a private company, but they should be allowing free information to be exchanged and everything. So it's there's a big gray area there in order to answer that question from a legal standpoint of view.
Right, and we're not legal experts.
Yeah, exactly. No, not legal experts. Okay, here's another one. Here we go.
Okay, let's understand something. Your First Amendment was gone with the Patriot Act. Understand that, know that, realize that.
We did give a lot of ground in terms of the Patriot Act, and I think that was a terrible thing that we allowed the government to do. For those that don't know, the Patriot Act basically allowed the government to tap into phone calls and various other things in order to provide national security. That's basically the stated mission of it. And that really does... go ahead.
It's borderline.
Yeah, I think it's that balance between security and freedom, and we always in America try, or at least want to try, to err on the side of freedom. I think that the Patriot Act oversteps that at least a little bit.
It's a really iffy ground, specifically on the Patriot Act. Not really part of our topic today, but we can cover it real quick. It violates rights to privacy given to us by the 14th Amendment, because the government can see or hear or track us. You got things like that. But in the current digital age, warfare is fought more so in a digital realm, it's fought before the first bullet from a rifle is usually ever fired. You have drones, you have satellites, you got hacking and programming, stuff that can happen across the globe. And all someone needs is internet access, and they can inflict damage. So the Patriot Act is something that we might be able to cover that in a later episode, because there's a lot there in terms of its constitutionality.
Sure.
And you would assume that any act that went through, since it's gone through the Supreme Court, would be constitutional, but as we're seeing, that is not exactly true.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that, especially the Roe v. Wade abortion stuff, that kind of proves that there's stuff that can go through even the Supreme Court that is not necessarily constitutional.
Yeah, Roe v. Wade is a whole other episode onto itself. Also, lots of different things you guys are bringing out is really helpful. I'm loving the content, you guys.
Yeah.
Got another one right here.
Guys, I hate violence. I hate what happened in that Capitol building.
I agree. I hate what happened in the Capitol building. Was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. I'm absolutely not excusing the individuals who committed acts of violence in the Capitol, whether they were those who directly hurt another individual, whether they hurt cops or whether they hurt just people in general. I'm not condoning violence. Me and Spencer, we do not condone violence at all. What we're saying is that the amount of people in the Capitol building that actually committed acts of violence was an infinitesimally small proportion compared to the million people that were outside. And the title that everybody is portraying with their whole cancel culture, omission of fact, censorship narrative is that they are creating this perspective where the million people, of which many of them never even actually saw the Capitol building. There were people that were lined up as far down the road. If you looked at the aerial pictures, if anyone wants to search them up, you can see the people it was a sea of people that went all the way down into the street before the Capitol building. They never even, some of them, I guess, would never even have seen the Capitol building due to the crowd. But they're just painting this even smaller proportion of the 300 individuals or so who actually even entered the Capitol building, an even smaller portion of that, those who committed violence, as we've said again and again, and they're using the actions of a few to condemn the actions of the many. And even further than that, they're using the actions of these few that committed, these very few that committed violence inside of the Capitol building. They're not only reflecting on the million people that stood outside, but they're using cancel culture to block anybody who has a different opinion and tries to say something against something against the narrative they're painting, that not only are the million people that were outside the building evil, every single Trump supporter in this entire country is someone who will walk into the Capitol building and commit acts of violence. And that is simply not true. That is absolutely unequivocally false. And that is the whole point of cancel culture and the narrative that they paint constantly. They constantly paint this narrative where what we say is how it needs to be, right? We say that every Trump supporter in the United States of America is evil, then you guys all need to believe that. Where's the evidence? We don't actually have evidence, but we're just going to say it's how it is, and you need to believe it because everything on the internet is true. Oh, wait, someone over there said that this isn't true. Oh, wait, where'd they go? They're gone. They're gone because these people are censoring them. They're removing them so they can't reveal information that hurts their narrative. And if anyone on this show were to ask me why people are committing acts of censorship, the only reason I could give you is money, because I can't think of any other reason why a member of this country, a citizen in the United States of America, would willingly commit acts that so horrendously affect the country in a negative way. I can't wrap my mind around that. It just does not compute.
I think a lot of it comes down to that money aspect, but also it's what they're doing for their beliefs. They look at it and they say, we don't agree with this person, so I'm going to use my power to cancel them. And that's actually go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, I like what you're saying there.
And that's kind of what Gina Carano was talking about in her post that she got fired for, is that there are people who are going to say, look, these people are evil. That's exactly what they're doing with the rioters at the Capitol. And they're taking that small group, painting it to 74 million Americans, and saying, look, they're all evil, right? That's exactly what they did in the Holocaust. They said all these Jews are evil. And so it's Gina Carano coming full circle. She got canceled for saying that, even though that is exactly the type of thing that they are saying.
Yeah, and real quick before we go ahead and wrap up for today, it's worth noting that in a digital age, the way that fear is spread is different than it was in the Holocaust, but the analogy is still the same. It was neighbor against neighbor. And when you paint 74 million Americans as all violent people thanks to the actions of a few, that's something that on a fundamental scale violates the basis of the entire American system. I mean, in our judicial system, in our system of crime, we have the belief that everyone is innocent until proven guilty, and these people are just taking the name. They don't even know the names of these 74 million Americans. These 74 million Americans are just normal, average people who, I mean, maybe they've probably, some of them could have even ever heard a fly, right? You have the actions of probably less than 100, I would guess, are probably the total number of people who committed acts of violence in the Capitol Hill. I don't have the exact number. I haven't seen it anywhere. But you have these acts of less than 100 or so that are being painted as the entire representation of a group of 74 million, of which many Trump supporters inside of our nation's support for Trump have actually called out these people who commit acts of violence and saying, hey, wait a second, we support the Capitol Hill peaceful protest, but what these people did is unacceptable. We don't agree with that. We don't want them rioting and burning and hurting people. We don't agree with that. But that doesn't matter because censorship has made it so people like Gina Carano, who tried to bring attention to what is happening, they remove the ability for people to learn about the truth, and therefore they fundamentally change the way that America works, because nobody has, and I'm not going to say that, not 300 million Americans or so that live in this country do not all have the direct link from voice of mouth for every little individual thing that happens in this country. We get it from our news, we get it from social media, we get it from all over the place. And that's why cancel culture, omission of fact, and censorship are such evils, because they remove the ability for people to find the truth out for themselves, or to back up their own opinions, or to really create any kind of argument against or even for, because what it boils down to is just listen to what you're told. Do what you're told. Follow this blindly. Don't ask questions. And if you try to ask questions, well, you're not going to find anything out anyway because we removed all the information.
It's the culture of guilty until proven innocent. You're guilty of what I say you are unless you can prove that you're not, right? You're racist unless you can prove that you're not racist. Oh, what do you mean? Well, you're not black, therefore you're racist unless you're not racist. I have no idea what you're talking about. That must mean you're racist.
Or you're violent until you prove you're not violent. How do I prove I'm not violent? Well, I'm sorry, you can't really prove you're not violent because we're not actually going to let you say anything because we don't like how you're interrupting our narrative. We got one more message. We'll go ahead and play that real quick, and then we'll wrap up for today, guys.
Yep.
I agree with you guys are saying, but you can't really compare the Jew situation because the real Jews were black, and what was portrayed is 100% false.
We're
Do
not
you mean
necessarily.
portrayed?
I can't speak as to what percentage of the Jews in Germany were black. But the comparison that she made between um, the Jews having everyone else turned against them and a similar thing happening here, I think that is an apt comparison. I agree with Ben Shapiro that Holocaust comparisons should generally not be made because it was a horrific event. But I think this comparison was a decent one and not a all out one where she didn't compare what's happening to a concentration camp. She made a very level headed comparison.
Yeah, she made a comparison that basically stated, or sorry, Gina Serrano made a comparison that basically stated that she sees similarities between the precursor to violence of the neighbor against neighbor violence against the Jews that occurred before the Holocaust ever actually happened. She sees comparisons between that and the current political hate and the divide of today. So she wasn't making a Holocaust analogy as much as people keep saying. They keep saying she's comparing it to the death of Jews or something like that. That's not what she said. And this is kind of where censorship takes a form in this, because people have removed. Okay, for instance, it took me 30 minutes to just find the original quote. Everything else, the original quote from Twitter, because Twitter had deleted it, and every other news organization that had reported on it had basically just clipped a couple sentences or a phrase out of what she had actually said. I wanted the whole truth, and it's difficult to find the whole truth. I finally found the truth from a news publisher out of, I think it was Sweden, is where I finally found the truth. Just some small publisher, wasn't really big. They weren't part of the Sweden obviously isn't part of this censorship that happens here in America, but they were the only place that I could find the truth. I finally found the whole thing. I have it saved to my phone, so I'll never lose it. But there's the inherent issue that what you're saying there, Master J or Mastermind, is that they have diluted the truth to the point that nobody really knows what the original thing she said was. Not to mention, they're now also portraying that what she said was a comparison of whatever's happening today to the deaths of millions of Jews in the Holocaust. That's not what she said. She's not comparing death because death hasn't occurred at all, really, compared to that. I mean, some people have died due to the BLM riots, and there were casualties in the Capitol Hill. But she's not comparing.
It's certainly not to the Holocaust level.
Yeah, she's not even remotely comparing to the Holocaust. I mean, that would, if she had compared the very small number of people who have lost their lives in recent events to the Holocaust, that would be something that I'd be like, well, what are you doing here, Gina? I mean, what on earth? That's not true at all. That was a horrible event in human history where millions of people lost their lives. That doesn't have anything to do with a very few incidents and few lives amount of lives lost. Obviously, it's sad that even one life has been lost, but it's not the same thing, and that's not the comparison that she made. She said the anger and the hate between neighbors due to political opinions in the United States today resembles that anger and hate that occurred against Jews before the Holocaust.
Yeah, I think that's a really great place to end our show, specifically because it wraps right around to what we were talking about at the beginning with Gina Carano and her canceling and the overall topic of censorship and cancel culture. So, yeah, I think thank you for that comment. That was a great place to end this.
Yep, that was a really great place. My name is Colson.
My name is Spencer. We're 18 and American.
We're signing off. Thank you, everybody, for coming up today. Everybody have a good day today, you guys.